We're so lucky to have Britt McClintock here from the Bay Area. Britt lives in Oakland. With over 15 years of experience in equity and inclusion, they've dedicated their career to reshaping institutions and industries to be more just, accessible, and community-driven. As director at UC Berkeley IT and co-founder of Susu Strategies, Britt specializes in fostering systemic change with higher education and tech spaces. Their expertise spans curriculum development, cultural engagement, and consulting, always with a focus on centering marginalized communities. From producing a documentary on binary gender socialization to advising universities and parents on race and gender conversations, Britt has continually pushed boundaries to challenge the status quo. Their work highlights the urgency of addressing digital redlining, bias in AI, and systemic barriers to STEM fields. With a passion for building community, they champion an approach where equity is not a checkbox, but an ongoing practice, one that drives creativity, productivity, and meaningful change. Join me in welcoming Britt McClintock.
We're so excited.
Me and ChatGPT wrote a good bio. Good bio. Let's see. Is this? Uh-oh. Help. Thank you, Noah.
No problem.
Okay. So welcome. I have some notes here, and I'll try really hard not to look down too much, but I want to make sure that I cover everything, and I didn't memorize it. I'm sorry for that. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to Boise Advertising Federation, Ray, who's like running Hack for It, and I'll tell you, when I reached out and was like, I want to talk about inclusion and technology, and I wasn't really sure how that was going to go. He was like, yes, that is important. So huge shout out to Hack for It for that. It is a pleasure to be here. Welcome to Inclusive by Design, Rewriting the Rules of Tech Strategy, which sounds really fancy, and I don't know why you're here. Maybe it's for Sarah. Thank you for bringing the people. But hopefully whatever I'm talking about today lands. If it doesn't, consider us thought partners now for a very small fee. I can definitely help you out in the future, chat with you. We can continue to talk about these things if it feels important to what you all are doing and where you work. So yes, awesome. Okay, who am I? Sarah kind of said who I was, but I'm Britt. I do use she and they pronouns. And if you forget that, you can just ask me. It's really easy. You just say, I forgot what pronouns you use, and I'll tell you. And that sounds really scary, but I always like to say that because you can ask. It's not offensive. You should just ask so then you don't mess up. I have for actually the last like 17 years now been doing what I've been calling the devil's work, which is DEI. Or the artist formerly known as DEI is what I'll say sometimes too. And I've been doing that under a different name, but I have been doing that work, culture work, for a really long time. I think lately my work has been mostly like, it's okay, like we just chill, we're good, let's take some space, things are tense. So I'd like to name that too, like things are tense in the world, and that's like a nice way of putting it. So yeah, my work shifts depending on what's happening in the world, but responsible for culture, inclusion, equity work at UC Berkeley IT, like Sarah said, co-founder of Susu Strategies. You can scan the code, that'll take you to the website. I'll talk a little bit more about what we do, but that's my business partner, Kayla. And Kayla has also been doing DEI work for many years, and we were doing that alone, really lonely. And then we finally found each other, and we're like, okay, maybe we should do this in community. Yeah. Susu, just so you know, actually is a West African term or Caribbean term. It usually stands for like a cooperative economics, right? So it's essentially like community members would maybe put money into a pot, and then every 6 months, one of those community members would get that money, right? So the idea for us was, well, what does that look like with ideas? And and collaborating and different perspectives around culture and culture building and strategy. And then not like hoarding that information, but sharing it with people. Cool. It's really a part of my practice to do this. No shade if you don't do this, but it feels important to me to anywhere I go, just make sure I'm naming the land and the labor and the life of the spaces that I'm in. And so I learned that Boise sits on the ancestral territory of the Shoshone Bannock, Northern Paiute people. Did I say that right? I think I said that correctly. Continue to be alive and flourishing members of the Boise community is my guess, right? So it's important for us to recognize those folks, but it's also really important that we recognize uncompensated labor, maybe of Black, Brown, Asian, Indigenous folks, honoring their diaspora, the life, the knowledge that was stolen due to violence. Another thing I like to do when I'm presenting is I'm consenting to learn in public. So usually when we come into spaces as experts or, the folks who have a little bit more knowledge about a certain topic, we're still like sort of really vulnerable up here. Not everything I'm saying is gonna land. I come from a completely different lived and learned experience and perspective, right? So that means you might ask me a question I might not know. You might know something I don't, and that is fine. So I like to name that. Another thing that I like to name is that throughout this whole presentation, I try really hard to not just entertain, but actually design this as like a modeling tool, right? Maybe this is how we can decolonize the way that we want to learn together and feel a little bit like less formal too. I'm like the most informal person, so. Okay, cool. Should we address the elephant in the room? Yeah, I think so. So when I was preparing this, I was thinking, well, I should probably like speak to DEI because it's just something that's in the news a lot. I don't know if you've heard. And so, yeah, I felt like it was just really important to touch on this really briefly, which is DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not new at all in the United States, has roots in 1960s, civil rights, started to include gender, sexual orientation, religion, country of origin over time, right? Some would say it dates even further back to the 18th century with the Quakers. You can always count on the Quakers. Quaker school teachers actually and abolitionists, a lot of their educational philosophy, it's the same as the DEI programming that we see today. It's coming from that time. So this has been around, right? It's not brand new. I just think it's showing up in the news in different ways than it ever used to. DEI often linked to HR departments. We could talk about that later, if that's good or bad, but I would say especially since the 80s, 90s, it was sort of a reactionary effort, which was, we don't want to be sued anymore. So, that's when we started to see like E&I, the diversity got thrown in there a couple years later. And then, 2020 rolls around, DEI increases by, I think, 51% DEI hires. And then that has significantly dropped in the last 5 years. So the reason that I mention all of this, as someone who does culture strategy work and wants to continue to do that work, is we actually should probably point out why in these last 5 years it turned into what it turned into. Even taking the political piece out of it, like why did it not work? And there's 4 reasons, I think, for that. One of which is time investment, resource investment, and that is like the human resource, and then the financial resource. Growth investment, meaning no career trajectory, no strategic planning, and then maybe no true belief in what DEI actually means and stands for, right, for the company. And then I would say the 4th thing is lack of shared vision and definition, right? So knowing that that is just the truth and that we're slowly sort of moving away from this acronym. Folks in my field are moving away from this acronym because it's sort of under attack, and knowing that the work won't stop. It's really important for us to think of like new and innovative ways to do this work, right? So, especially in tech. Cool. And just to ground us a little further, as we move through the presentation, and this is something that I'm modeling because it's also something I hope that you all are doing when you're having conversations, because in the title of my presentation is the word inclusion, it's really important that we define how we're using it today. This is not the only way to define it, but it really helps us all move in the same space together when we're using the same definition. So to be inclusive, right, is actually to be in process of inviting people in, valuing those people, regardless of how they identify. I like to use, it's kind of a silly metaphor, but I really like to use the metaphor of the seat at the table. But I like to use it if I was hired to work at a zoo and the C-suite were giraffes. So if the C-suite are made up of giraffes and they invite me to come sit at the table, to advise and recommend certain things, right? And maybe even hold them accountable. I have to remember that, like, they've actually always controlled who pulls the chair up, how the table is set, what food is being served, right? And even what is considered permissible conversation. So inclusion often incorrectly assumes that the table was built for everyone from the start. But I don't know what giraffes eat, but I don't think I eat that, right? And my guess is the chair that they provided me is not gonna really work for my human body. So I know that sounds like silly, but it's actually really helpful when we wanna think about what it means to rewrite tech strategy, right? Or rewrite any strategy and reimagine a cultural blueprint for our companies, right? So. Okay. Can you just yell it out? What is this, or what do you think this is? I know it's kind of hard to see. A house, okay. An apartment, yeah. Yeah, maybe if you had to say like where it is, where do you think it is? Okay, yeah. True. If I did not edit it though, and it was actually like a living room, where do you think it would be? It's not, there's no wrong answers. An apartment, sure. Yeah. What state? Don't know. Who might live there, if you had to guess? Maybe a professional, yeah. Maybe a single person, do we think, or a family? Children don't live there, yeah. Okay, all actually really good guesses, and at first glance would agree with all of those, except I know that this is a prison in Norway, right? And we can have a lot of conversations about the prison industrial complex and prisons in different countries. That's not what we're doing today at all. I don't want to do that. I just actually like to use this as a really like easy exercise sometimes in the beginning of a meeting, or if I'm leading like a strategic planning session for a group. It's like a really quick way to be like, these are ways we can reimagine systems, right? Not everything that we understand has to look the same way all the time. So it gets people in the headspace of being like, oh, right, yeah, we can totally reimagine how we want to do work every day. So I like that, I like that example. And I think that then we can start to tie that same kind of thinking to things like productivity, to what time is, to what professionalism is, AI, advertising, et cetera, right? Another example that I like to use when I'm trying to start to reimagine the rules around like how we build strategy is using this analogy from the birdcage analogy from 1983, Marilyn Fry, who I believe is an anthropologist. It's a way to explain complex systems and essentially point out that like often invisible they usually are always immobilizing. So again, really obvious but powerful, right? If I press my face up to a cage, a bird cage, there's usually an unobstructed view of that bird. I could turn my head to the right or to the left and I might see a wire, but I might be thinking, right, like, why does the bird not fly away? Or I might think the bird loves the cage, right? And of course, like as I step back, I'm gonna see that there's all of these wires and they're interlocking in this sort of interesting pattern. And it should then become clear that this network of like systematically related barriers surround the bird. Some birds get out. Once they do, that's even scarier sometimes on the outside, right? But when I'm thinking about rewriting the rules of strategy, like I said, I think about this. I think about barriers, right? Like digital redlining. If you don't know what digital redlining is, it is the denial of adequate internet access to certain areas, right? So it's usually often based off like race or ethnicity or income, really similar to redlining, where we were denying housing loans to and certain folks to certain neighborhoods and certain people, right? So these are not secrets. Like, I'm not trying to indoctrinate you. These are facts, right? And so at my job at the university in IT, I think about this a lot. I think about how 1 in 3, I think, Black and Latinx students don't have access to high-speed internet, which means they're using their phones to maybe write a paper, to do their homework, right? Which means then I need to have big conversations maybe with my cybersecurity team, big conversations with my digital design team, and thinking about the fact that our students are engaging with most of their schoolwork on their phones. So what does that mean? You know, and what kind of conversations are we having, and what kind of barriers are in the way that we can potentially break down? And the thing is, it's really time consuming. UC Berkeley IT is like one of the only university IT departments that has a dedicated like DEI professional. That is not common. And I am one of like 600. And that's a lot of people for me to try to figure out how to, you know, reimagine and re-envision. And I don't particularly love to use the word dismantle systems because I don't actually think we need to do that all the time. I think that we can work with what we have and reimagine a lot of those things. But still, 1 person for 600 is a lot of people. So yeah, so this is, you know, I mean, it's kind of another way to get people thinking about, barriers and systems. Okay, so thinking about barriers, when it comes to sort of writing the rules of tech strategy, it's equally as important to think about language barriers. So human beings have been coding and code switching for forever, honestly. And when I think about one of the most significant codes, when it comes to humans, it is, any guesses? It's up there. Yeah, it's our names, actually. But yes, yeah, it is language as well. But I would say one of the biggest like codes that we come into the world with is our name. That is coding us from the beginning, right? And if we're blessed with some like weird old ass 13th century family name, or like an African name or a Muslim name, right? It could be real rough out there. And I'm sure all of you have sat in class throughout your years with that one student where the teacher is always like messing up their name repeatedly all year long, where you're like, Mrs. Smith, it has been 9 months. We've been together for so long. It's wild that you don't know this kid's name. But, right, that is like what we are coded with. And because humans are so cool and we're the best coders, we actually get around this with nicknames, right? So it's like a way to go around the system. And nicknames can be informal, but it does allow this workaround. And so usually those kids by 3rd grade, maybe even 2nd grade, are like, call me Dre, please, for the love of God, call me Dre. And then the teacher's like, okay, yeah, got it, Dre, easy. right? And doesn't have to then like go through this whole process. I don't think that that's the way that it should go, just so you know. But that is like how we code and how we continue to recode, right? Okay, so yeah, thinking about codes then in the workplace culture, I think about things like job descriptions. I think about like what time we go to work, when we leave work, how much time I spend like pretending to work and not work. I think about singular words like professionalism, productivity, heavily coded words, right? And usually coded by a very specific group of people, and then that becomes the norm. One of my favorite quotes is from Rua Benjamin, who wrote the book Race After Technology. It's really good. And she says, codes operate within powerful systems of meaning that render some things visible, others invisible, and create a vast array of distortions and dangers. So what happens when certain kinds of cultural coding get embedded in technical coding, right, and or software programs? So again, a really good way when I'm trying to like talk to folks who are doing, you know, tech work and are essentially like, I have had people say to me like, I don't actually need this. Like I'm an engineer. I don't need to talk about this. If I can relate it back to in some ways like, okay, well, let's talk about coding in the way that we talk about names. You know, they're like, okay. Or I'll be like, do you write emails? And they're like, yeah, I write so many emails. I'm like, okay, well, you do need this actually. So the cool thing I will say though is that problem solving is at the heart of tech. And we know that an algorithm is a set of instructions, rules, calculations, right, designed to solve problems. But I'm often curious, like, are we asking whose problems, you know, and what problem? And also who is included in the problem solving? What I really like about like my previous consulting work with different tech companies and now working at a university IT department is the way that people's minds work. Like, honestly, my colleagues are brilliant. It is like my mind does not work that way. And it's incredible to me. I often think about, I call like my colleagues ninjas because IT folks, like there could be so much happening behind the scenes and the majority of the population never knows. Like things get fixed like that. I think about when COVID hit and lockdown started and UC Berkeley took everything remote in 4 days. And if you know how big UC Berkeley is, it's like a small city. There's like 50,000 people between staff, faculty, students, right? So as a community, like that's a huge lift and it's impressive to me. And it shows me like how much we're capable of and how much good we can do when we incorporate diversity of thought into solving problems that include everybody. So problem solving, right? Solving problems, fixing glitches. These are essential. And, you know, they also are like things that tend to be reactionary because things will come up and we have to fix them quickly. So yeah, problem solving in tech is just one piece. But then I'm really interested in the equity and the access and the inclusion piece of that, right? How do we already get like the people in the room from the jump to like avoid algorithmic, biases? How do we already have the people in the room with non-technical critical thinking skills, right? To help us point out that like, yes, Google Maps might be mapping like the quickest route to my destination. And that is using previous data from city planners. Thank you. But also like, we're also increasing maybe the pollution in low-income neighborhoods because we built a bunch of like overpasses in those neighborhoods too, right? Or yeah, when like Google Maps is like turn right on Malcolm 10 Boulevard, I, as the user, right, am gonna think this is now validating that like I'm not being thought of at all. Like I am not included. Whoever helped program, the GPS that told me that this is where I'm turning, there was someone that was not in the room, is my guess, right? So these are really important things to think about. It's not just the reactionary piece. Also, like culture work or engagement and inclusion or whatever you want to call it is not an add-on. And I hear it a lot, like we need to implement, at least that I would say like 2020 to 2023, people are like, we need to implement this into everything that we do. And I believe it. I hear them, I believe it. And the tricky piece is like, how do you actually do that? Because it is so time consuming to actually do that. It means we have to reimagine like who we invite to the table, who we give access to. Right, so yeah. Just some other things to really consider. Okay, we're good on time. So yeah, I have been thinking about, and this is like my opinion, but like when I'm thinking about communities that are most impacted by fill in the blank, maybe they should be the ones driving technological advances. I don't know. It's just a thought. When I create like a DEI strategic plan for Berkeley IT, I'm trying to do that by centering the currently marginalized groups that work there. That doesn't mean that like everything we do is like about them or relying on them. It just means that they're driving the conversation because they're seeing things that other folks aren't seeing. So we need to have people in the room who we've not included before. And I know it sounds so simple. Like I'm not saying anything that I know that is like blowing your mind, but I'm saying it, and I think people who are DEI practitioners continue to say it because we're like, please just do it. Can you just, like, it sounds so simple. You're telling me it sounds simple, except you're not doing it, right? And it is hard. It is hard to do. Like, I don't want to discount that at all. Wow. So that's one thing that I think is really important. It's totally fine. Another thing that I want to point out is CPI, which is the Collective Intelligence Project, if you don't know them. I think that looking at groups and doing thought partnership with groups like them is the way that we should probably be moving in advancing technology when we're thinking about it. So check out their website. They're really cool. But I will just say they focus on, and I'm going to read this so I don't get it wrong, focus on the research and development of collective intelligence capabilities, decision-making technologies, processes, and institutions that expand a group's capacity to construct and cooperate towards shared goals. So collective intelligence, which I'm sure you have heard of, right, is like how we set and execute on collective priorities. So innovations in collective intelligence systems, capitalism, democracy, right, like they have shaped the modern world. And so collective problems become more complex, and then collective intelligence systems like have to think about some of these things. And I think that honestly, we have built some really incredible things. I can't say that we haven't. And some of those things are also failing some of us as well. So yeah, I like the work that they're doing. I think that when I think about the future of technology and where I want to be, I also want to be thinking in this way. Okay, I want to just briefly chat with what Susu is doing, because I've talked about a lot of things that in theory sound good and like in real time are really difficult. And I know that. It's why we started Susu. A really big part of that was we were seeing one-off hires for like 500 to 1,000 people. And then those 1,000 people were like, you didn't solve racism today? And, that's like genuine, like the expectations that we put on folks and ask to do this work are unrealistic. And so, yeah, no, I didn't solve racism today, but like I did not do my job, right? So Kayla and I came together to be like, how do we create teams for people, for these one-off people who are sort of just like asking for help and not getting it? So it sort of started as like a membership model, which was, you don't have the money to hire a team of DEI folks? Well, how about this? You give us $50,000 for the whole year, and then we'll give you 8 hours a week of our, or however much time, of like working with that DEI person. Now they have a team of people. Now we're creating a strategic plan together, right? And as a team, we can hold folks who are at the top of the org chart accountable for some of these things. That's how it started. And then from there, we've been doing a lot of really fun and, I think important work. One of the things we're working on right now, it says guidebook, but it actually is like, do you guys remember the Choose Your Own Adventure? So it's a Choose Your Own Adventure graphic novel for retention. And there'd be two versions, right? There'd be one for like the manager, and then there would be one for the employee. And it's just a different way to move through like retention strategy that doesn't feel boring. Like feels like you are also a part of that journey. So throughout that, then you get to learn different resources and really like learn about yourself as a people manager, and then also learn about yourself as an employee. Like, do I actually know how to negotiate my salary? I don't, and so that would be built into some of these guides. The hope is to build like a graphic novel, choose your own adventure for recruitment and hiring as well. Other things that we're working on is we're trying to create some assessment tools and feedback, because that's also like measuring culture is really hard to do. So one thing that we've been thinking about is, well, what does it look like, because we all have like survey fatigue. What does it look like to move through a survey? But if it's on a scale from 1 to 5, if I hit 2, something pops up and it's a resource that is gonna like help me understand why I picked 2, right? And help me understand maybe why I'm so unhappy at work. And I know that sounds obvious, but like some people don't know. They just are pissed off all the time. You probably know these people, and you're like, why are you so grumpy all the time? And there could be so much happening on their day to day because we spend so much time at work. Another thing that's not up here that we're working on is, what does it look like to, especially in technology, like folks who work in tech have access to some of the most amazing tools, right? So what does it look like to have a 70-30 model, which is 70% of your job is doing your actual job for the company, doing the things that need to get done. 30% of your job then is working in a community model. That could be cross-departmental, that could be cross-field, where you're using some of these like really amazing tools that you're given for free at work to create things that actually like better your systems and your day-to-day too. So those are some of the things that Kayla and I do, and happy to talk more about that. The last thing is just some key takeaways from stuff that we talked about. I said we, but me. I used to get really mad. My mom would always be like, we, when she would talk about herself, and I'm like, why does she do that? And I just did it. I'm gonna have to call her and apologize. Some of the things I talked about, right? Language we choose to use is a form of human coding, right? And so that can either include or exclude important groups of folks that you might want there. Who you invite to the strategic planning table is only a piece of inclusion. You also need to alter the table so that everyone is sitting at it equitably. And yeah, what does tech need most in this time of AI? I think a community of diverse, of people diverse in thought, ability, experience, and identity. Yeah, so really, I nailed it. I mean, I think we have 5 minutes. So if you have questions, this would be a really good time. to ask them. And if you don't, also, I will say, asking questions in a group can feel bad, so you can do the thing where you like line up and then you talk to me after, like after yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. You have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick. You said reimagine versus dismantle, and that's like your personal choice.
Yeah.
Can you share why?
Sure, yeah. I think that when I think about the work that I've done in the last 5 years and going in really, because everyone was really excited to do this work. I don't know if you guys maybe don't remember, but like people were stoked. They were reading White Fragility, and then all these reading groups were happening, and everyone was like, we are going to change the world. I mean, I felt it. I felt it in 2020 and 2021. And I went into, I think that time, I had started at Berkeley, being like, let's tear it all down, and it just it wasn't realistic, and it was like a lot of energy and power that I could, energy and power and that I could have put in different places and done like in a smaller way, so that we could have built into, I think, the spaces that I really was hoping we could be. And so, yeah, I sort of stopped using them. It doesn't mean that I don't think we should dismantle systems. We should. We totally should. But I think it's an access piece. Like, it's accessible when I say reimagine versus dismantle. Because I will say that rapport building is huge. Like, it's a really big part of what I do. I spent the first year at Berkeley just talking to people one-on-one. I mean, I didn't do anything else. And yeah, so I think that it feels really important. I think sometimes when we use the word dismantle, we might be excluding folks from the jump, until you have their investment in whatever it is you're doing. Yeah.
Give an example of just like in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Strategic inclusion, day-to-day, real-time example of what might that look like at a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think, okay, power. I don't know if you all see that show up at work, but like power is something that shows up a lot in like meetings. So one thing that I could, recommend folks to do is like who's talking in your meetings, making sure that you're like shifting power in a meeting, who's creating the agenda for the meeting that day. And yeah, I think that's a really good way to shift culture in like an hour. And I think it's also something that people genuinely appreciate. And you will have folks who are like, I don't want to lead the meeting. Oh gosh, don't ask me to do it. And you could be like, okay, cool. Then 2 of you will do it today. You can do it in accountability buddies or whatever. But yeah, thinking about like the day-to-day tasks that you have to do anyway. Like I sit in so many meetings. I try really hard to, every time I have a meeting, people will be like, we love coming to Britt's meetings because they're so weird and we don't know what we're going to get. It doesn't mean we don't get things done. So I think that is an easy way to shift power. And then I think also asking folks, like, what does it mean to be productive today? Where are you at? What does it mean for you to actually be productive today? Oh, you read the news this morning? Oof, okay, you might not be productive today. Got it. And then like not making people feel bad about that. Yeah, those are some thoughts. Anything? Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious because I work on a tech team, and we work with like Black with code. So we have a couple people on our team that have a bit of a language barrier. How could people on our team kind of make that easier for the person with the language barrier, kind of work and collaborate with us? Like, are there things that we can do, just right off the bat to kind of make them more comfortable or help them with that?
Yeah, so I just want to understand the folks who have a language barrier, how to support them or support the folks, how to support them. Yeah, good question. One thing I did when I got into Berkeley was we started like a non-native English speaking support association. And it was led by someone who had been at the organization for 15 years, and she grew up in India. She has a strong accent, and she was like, I've never been able to talk to anybody about the fact that it's been really hard for me for the last 15 years. And that when folks come in with like a British accent, everyone is like, oh my God, we love it. And then when I sit in meetings, people are finishing my sentences for me, right? So yeah, one thing we did right away was like, we need a support association, and we need to have like lunch and learn situations where it's not just folks who are English language learners or non-native English speakers and doing the emotional labor, but instead like having other people share out about what language means to them, what it looks like. We had someone do a whole like presentation on African-American vernacular English. And so trying to also find ways to be like, when it comes to coding and language and like puns, that was another thing. She was like, these puns, like the way that people, it's not funny. I don't understand. Being able to name some of those things and talk about it is really helpful. Yeah, I'm sure I have more thoughts, but yeah, we can share contact info. Yeah. Cool. Okay, we did it. We did it, even with all of the announcements, and we did it. So I am, you will have the website, but I will also say, come up to me and grab my info. You know, it's so funny, I packed everything except my business card. But happy to write it on a piece of paper, old school. And I did say for a small fee that we would work with you, but also like I am here just as a thought partner. I promise we can exchange some emails for free, and happy to share resources, because there's no reason to hoard any of those things. Like I want people to feel like they can do this. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate you.